Hi, Booktube, it's Amy. I'm back with another reading from Will Y. Darling's The Private Papers of a Bankrupt Bookseller. Today we are on page 132, beginning with a section titled Real Soldiers. I heard a story of a picture which appeared in Punch during the war. I never saw it, but a man who was buying a war book told it me. He was quite moved telling it, and so was I hearing it. Two men in khaki, cluttered up with rifle and battle kit, are leaving Victoria Station and crossing up towards Buckingham Palace Road. They are unshaven and most unmilitary-like, although they have come straight from the Somme fighting on leave. A very smart guardsman in full regimentals passes on the other side of the road. "Bill," one calls out to his pal. "Bill, look, a soldier." Was there ever anything like these Kitchener's Army men? And as I read that, I have the feeling that I've read it aloud before, so perhaps that was at the tail end of the last video. But if not, then I have read it here. But we'll move on to page 133, which is titled Strategy. Last week, I sold Little Hart's book, The Real War, and on the rebound I caught the buyer. His name is Gorry, and he is a Scotsman. Gorry told me he was on the staff of some Scots regiment, the Coldstream Guards or the Gordons. He was very full of it, and in connection with his duties was in touch with the French. He told me an astonishing story, and told it something like this as I recollect it. Foch was commander-in-chief at this time of the French army. The unity of command had still to be achieved. Foch said, "This is a pretty business. Here am I, a master of open warfare conditions, and the most rigid trench and siege warfare the world has ever seen is what I have to face. Nevertheless, I am Foch." Foch resumes, "I am Foch. Circumstances do not permit me to impose my will on the enemy, and so create those conditions of open warfare in which I am master. Yet I must impose my will on the enemy. I can and must. I am Foch. I cannot drive in the enemy's front, but I can induce him to leave his rigid formations, and he unknowingly will then give me open warfare. How will I induce him to abandon his impenetrable system of defense? I will offer him a lure. Now let me consider. Already one part of the soil of France has been overrun by the enemy. He will be encouraged to overrun it again. No need to sacrifice more miles of territory. The land of the Somme, over which he retired in 1917, there will I induce him to open his attack. I must have good baits. I am Foch. The British, they hold their position with far too many men. They will take over more of the line. They will stretch their line so thinly that only one man holds every 25 meters. The enemy will be looking for a front upon which to attack in the spring. They will find out the weakest part of the front. They will find out the weakest part of the front held by the British Fifth Army. They will concentrate all their force on that sector. They will overwhelm the British. They will stretch their lines of communications across the devastated Somme. They will be allowed to go as far as the ravaged territory extends. They will create a wide salient, and then, not till then, will I attack. I am Foch. Then, when open warfare conditions are presented, I must win, and the enemy will present me with these conditions." And so Gorry tells me it all happened. Foch struck when the Boches had almost entered Amiens, and it was the first blow of what became the final victory 6 months later. I told Gorry about Walter Shaw Sparrow's book, The Fifth Army, in March 1918, which I am trying to get for him. It doesn't support his theory, but he is one of those men whom the war has left restless. He admits he died in it, and that's how he puts it. His interests finished with the war. He is a revenant in a land of ghosts. His body ought to be with the lads who died at Loos, or the boys who went out in July 1916 on the Somme, or anywhere but in England carrying about a patent carpet sweeper in a cardboard box. And so he talks sometimes to me of strategy, although the strategy he would like to master if he is to do his quota of sales is the strategy of getting past the maid in order to show her mistress his box of tricks. And the next section is on page 135, and it's titled Trade Books. 2 books on my trade have come my way this week, and there is something in both worth noting. These notes are to make me a better bookseller. They aim at clearing up my ideas, and the writing of them fills up my time. My first, like an acrostic, is A for American. It is an American book by Ruth Brown Park on bookshops and how to run them. In the first chapter, the authoress writes a thing in which my heart warms and which incidentally discloses why a bookshop became my choice of a business. It is worth writing down for my own satisfaction. I can always set these contentions against the bills and financial problems which often outface me. Books underneath their square surface, let's start that over. Books underneath their square surface value carry realms of farther interior interest. You may not only pick them up and hold their solid circumference in your hands, but you may open them, peer into their unfolding pages, and bury yourself in the delights of these pages. Then, when you have surfeited yourself with those delights, you may pass them on to your patrons for money. We know of no other business where a merchant may have both his cake and eat it at the same time. The other book is published by Constable and is called 40 Years in My Bookshop. The author is Walter T. Spencer, but I cannot write anything about it after all. 40 years. I will not be 40 years in my bookshop. And the next section is titled When I Am Dead, also on page 135. Perfect weather, and I am glad to shut my shop and go up to the hillsides that surround this place where I work and live. I lay on the grass outstretched. I blinked up at the sky and tree and was suffused with sheer physical pleasure. I turned over and peered into the grass. It was living with beetles and ants and small spiders and flies and insects. A worm cast was among the roots of the grass. What a spate of life, what a squirming, writhing multitude there is of us. On my back again, hands clasped behind my head, legs sprawled ungainly, I thought, as I often do, of death. This would be the way to die, I thought. Life would just pass away from this body into which it has so strangely breathed itself. That would do. I would be then as I was when Julius Caesar came to England. I would be then as I was when Queen Elizabeth so strongly told her captains to do battle with Spain. I would be as I was when Napoleon saw his dream was dust. I would be content if I can come in that way. My only misgiving is my carcass. How repulsive is the idea to me of my late housing being lifted, one at the head, one at the feet, with me hanging lumpily and limply between, being lifted and carted away. They lie so still, those mortuary bodies. The next section here is titled Books No Decent Bookseller Would Keep. My pencil almost quivers in my hand. Certainly I am shaken. I am as Luther at Wittenberg or Latimer at Smithfield. I have made a declaration. I have made a gesture with a sacrifice. Last week I bought at the sale room some parcels of books. They didn't cost much, but I like these purchases. They are as thrilling as the lucky bags of my childhood and contain even more exciting treasures. An earlier purchase at the same sale, 12 books for 4 shillings, included that forgotten success, The Sky Pilot by Ralph Connor, 4 volumes of these exciting romances, Wilson's Tales of the Borders and of Scotland, and a second edition, only, alas, of these twain. I had 4 shillings worth of pleasure out of the parcel, and I count on selling the dozen books for not less than 12 shillings. There are 1 or 2 which will go for 2 pence, or even, I fear, will only fetch a penny. Who will buy, for example, The Dignity of Business by H.E. Morgan nowadays? The proud inventor of the phrase, business as usual, is not a bestseller as far as literature is concerned. But I may be unduly pessimistic. He certainly was not. Well meant, no doubt. These 3 words express too readily the businessman's outlook on the war, and perhaps made for us a good deal of our troubles then and since. My hand is steadier. I will record what I found and what I did. In a parcel of books, I found 2 volumes of the What a Young Man Should Know series. I burned them with difficulty in the old fireplace in the basement. They stunk, actually, and metaphorically. They should not have been written. They should not have been printed. They should not have been published. If, however, writer, printer, and publisher have failed, I, a decent bookseller, have not failed. I have withdrawn these copies from circulation, and I am proud of it. This is no heat about nothing, no storm in a teacup. The books are well meant, I will agree, if you like, but they are wrong. Not that they contain anything bawdy or filthy. They are just wrong. The impudence of the title offends me. What a young man ought to know, indeed. There is nothing a young man ought to know. In the beginning, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. He didn't go about striking matches or lighting candles. There was light for those who had eyes to see. The miracle and the loveliness and beauty of life is that it is no fenced-in preserve. All may eat of the tree of good and evil, and all may learn by that experience. The world will not be parceled up into what is good for young man or 25 and what is good for graybeards of 80. There is light. He that hath eyes to see and ears to hear, let him, nay, he must, use them in fear, in peril, in danger, but he must use them or perish. I will not distribute such literature, and I swear, as a decent bookseller, I will burn all unsuitable books, which by misadventure I buy. That is the self-denying ordinance of a decent bookseller. Months ago I wrote these lines, and I am a different man today. Not that I go back on my self-denying ordinance. I adhere to it, for I have just burned Maria Monk, a violent anti-Catholic book, in paper covers, and before the war, anyway of large circulation. The book is in bad taste, and I would not pass on it. I don't mind, I find on examination of my outlook, books which might be called obscene or bawdy. I am fond of quite a few, as a matter of fact, but they have a largeness which makes them lovable. Jurgen, for example, I have heard condemned. It is a delightful book to me, and it has many passages which I have marked, foolishly perhaps, in the volume still on my shelves. I believe I marked it to make it unsaleable, for which sin may heaven and my creditors forgive me. How hot I become on these subjects, and how unnecessary it all is. From one point of view, I ought to keep anything the public want. I am a bookseller, not a censor. But I remember that, before I was ever a bookseller, a woman who was my mother conceived and bore me, a man-child. I am not abating my birthright. This self-examination as to the books no decent bookseller should keep will not let me rest, and I return to it. I loathe these books which are sold to silly women and sillier businessmen by installments. I daren't write the titles, but they are sold by companies with highfalutin names through salesmen and saleswomen who come from door to door and from shop to shop. The manner of selling shows the manner of book they sell. They have half a cover and a few pages pasted to it. They have a long story, and the subjects of these skeleton books are usually of a very comprehensive character. You can, if their tale is to be believed, buy a book all about the home or the dog. You can buy a book about the universe or the imperial inheritance, and you can do this by paying 2 shillings in cash or something like that, and an indefinite series of payments thereafter. A shopman the other day asked me to buy his 12 volumes, and I was aghast when I refused to give him even a shilling a volume. But I must be fair. The manufacturers, they are manufacturers rather than publishers, know that no decent bookseller would have their books. They know that too well, and that is why they advertise for ladies and gentlemen of good address to introduce important works to their friends in exchange for generous remuneration. We booksellers are not that sort of ladies and gentlemen, though heaven knows I may come to that yet. I will do it if fate forces me, but not today. O'er the past, not even the gods have power. Tomorrow do thy worst, for I have had my hour. I walk up and down my shop. Nelson, on his quarter-deck, was not a prouder man than I. And we're at 15 minutes, so we're going to leave it at that for the day. But the next section here is titled The Deadly Parallel and 3 Recommended Books, followed by unfashionable books being what might be called bad stock. So we will end the video there. And I do hope you're enjoying these readings from the private papers.